Okay, still working through Wesch chapter 5, um, talking about hunter-gatherers. You saw the video there in the previous video. Pardon me. And I just wanted to caution us. That number one, this is an old video from 70 years ago. Uh, so things are very different there now. Although there are still people living as hunter-gatherers on the land, they're much fewer. Also, need to caution you that yes, the people there do not have as good diets. They are living right next to a state, whether the South African government or Botswanan government, or prior to that it was the British Empire or the Zulu state or any of the other Bantu states that have been around for thousands of years in southern Africa. It's a very civilized place, long history of powerful states building big empires and all that. So the people who are living there have been living next to state society for millennia. It's not anything new to them, and so we shouldn't draw any conclusions about how they live, as opposed to how people lived, living kind of similar lifestyles, but in a much different context, 100,000 years ago, when there were no states next door to affect them. And so also they're living in desert lands, in a very marginal environment, and 100,000 years ago they'd be living right in the choice river valley with lots better hunting and everything else. What can we learn from lands? Generally bands are peaceful. Um, there's not a lot of violence involved with band society. Equality is apart from a slight division of labor between men and women. All adult members are equal, with no differences in wealth or prestige, little private property, and group decisions are made by consensus. Now, there is a tendency toward pragmatism. They do have a lot of confidence about life and take opportunities as they come. They don't feel restricted very much in terms of what they could be doing. There's an anti-civilization over the past 5,000 years. Those who have chosen to live as hunter-gatherers usually do so consciously, rejecting the alternatives of farming, education, business, wage labor, dependency, etc. And this is something that those filmmakers, when they were there in the 50s, didn't realize. And it took anthropologists going. The first people who came there were people working in digs in South Africa, and they thought, oh, let's do some research with these hunter gatherers and see if we can learn something from them. Um, that was in the 40s, and then in the 50s, people started learning the various languages of these people a little bit better and doing long-term interviews with them. And so by the 1960s, they started getting life histories and realized that some of these people, were living as hunter-gatherers consciously. They weren't living as their ancestors had lived. They were living the way they wanted to live because they had tried it. They talked to one of the women there in the little band, and she said, "Oh yeah, I know all about Cape Town. I lived there for 3 years. I was a maid in a big house. I hated it. It was too noisy. It's much nicer here in the countryside doing this." So these are not Stone Age tribes, right? Who are totally ignorant of the modern world. Very often they're very well informed about it. They know exactly what it has to offer them, and they reject it. So we need to realize that these are people who have rejected civilization and are living there consciously. Gift economy, private property is held lightly. Human relationships are more important than private property. Can we compare current bans? And I know when I showed that video of the people, the hunters sort of chasing the wildebeest across the landscape, you're thinking, oh, I'm looking into what the world was like 100,000 years ago. And it's true. They're using bows and arrows to hunt very large animals due to their very powerful poison. And they're not even using stone tools. This is not Stone Age. This is like wood. They're using wooden weapons to bring down a giraffe. It's incredible. Can we compare the current bans to humanity prior to 12,000 years ago? No. Uh, Extreme caution. A comparison can only be made in a very, very general, limited way. So, number one, uh, hunting and gathering 12,000 years ago was very different because Paleolithic people had not yet been forced from the richest environments, that's river valleys, by armies of diseased and starving farmers. Whenever we see hunter gatherers today, they have much better health because they're living in much worse health than they would have 100,000 years ago because of um, the I'm just going to have to stop here. Hold on.